to get to and thrilled that you're with us. First of all, we have a guest in studio right here at the top of the show. Happy to have him, our Secretary of State, Jay Ashcroft. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Always good to be here.
Well, you were in town primarily because of Attorney General Sessions, who spoke at the courthouse this morning.
Had the opportunity to meet with the Attorney General, talk to him a little bit about how we're implementing photo ID, thank him for his stand for the rule of law and for his willingness to get out and make sure that the federal government is doing everything it can to protect the people of Missouri and the rest of the states.
It's a breath of fresh air when I look around the country and I see the tantrums that people are throwing because you've got a man who stands up and says, well, I'm sorry, we're not breaking new ground here. This is what the law says, and we're going to enforce it. That people don't like that.
Well, a lot of people don't realize it, but unless you have the rule of law, you can't have a free society. Because the basis of a free society has to be one thing, knowing what you can do, what the punishment is if you do this, or what you'll be punished for doing. If you don't have the rule of law where the law applies equally to everyone and is enforced appropriately in a true justice system, you cannot have a free society. So I am just excited that we have a change in the Justice Department in Washington, D.C.
I was happy to see the Attorney General today when he discussed Ferguson. He didn't just bring it up and dismiss it because he felt like he was in St. Louis and he needed to bring it up. He talked about the impact it had on the community. He talked about the ongoing debate about interactions between the minority community and law enforcement, and that his Justice Department will continue to make sure that there is not discrimination when it comes to policing. But then he carried that a step further and said, but what we've seen in this country recently is sort of a knee-jerk reaction to Ferguson and some other situations where instead of doing proactive policing like he talked about there off the top, a lot of communities have kind of drawn back, and we can't have that. And it was a great point, and I thought he handled it very well.
I think he did, and I think it just comes out of his decades of experience as an assistant U.S. attorney, as a U.S. attorney, as a senator, and now as Attorney General. He has served a life of serving the people and understands that you have to do both things. You have to protect the rights of the individuals of the community, and you have to go after the bad guys also.
Yeah, it's a good point. One thing you mentioned that you came to talk to him about was voter ID, which you're in the process of implementing. How's that going?
It's going really well. We're really spending our time now with what we call our Show It, the number 2 vote, Show It to Vote campaign. That's also the name of our website. We want to make sure that everyone knows, regardless of what you've heard from different sources, that if you're a registered voter in the state of Missouri, when this law goes into effect, you can vote. We want you to vote. We want you to be a part of the process. We want your voice to be heard. And, of course, if you're not registered to vote, get onto the Secretary of State's website. Give us a call. We'll help you do that also.
Yeah, tell us that website again so people can get on here. This is interesting. There's a flyer, and I'm assuming this is something people could print off of the website or just read the information,
it's
right?
on the website. We've distributed it to local election authorities so that they'll have it at the municipal elections. But it's SHOWIT, the number 2 vote, showittovote.com. We have a hotline on there. You can send us messages from the website. There's a way for you to sign up to know when we're in your area to talk to you about the implementation of this law. We want to make sure that we're getting out into every community of the state and assuring everyone, if you're a registered voter, you can vote. If you need an ID, we will help you get one. We're here to serve.
Right. And forever we've had people claiming that, you're disenfranchising people. I don't know that you could have made this much easier.
No, I mean, I was an engineer originally. We used to, in our math classes, you had to do proofs where you prove something logically. There is no way, logically speaking, that if you're allowed to vote now, this law will take that right to vote away from you.
Right. Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft is our guest right now. We're talking about voter ID, and they'll give you one if you don't have one. It's just a way to ensure the sanctity of our voting system, right? And you and I talked about this, in fact, on Saturday night at that Reagan-Lincoln Day dinner. The importance of making sure that the people who are voting are supposed to be voting. Right. There was a case here in St. Louis. In fact, the Post just had something on it the other day about a Nigerian citizen, and of course he was indicted for ID fraud. But admitted that he had been voting for several major elections as a non-citizen. How do we crack down on that?
Well, I mean, when you look at how to protect elections, just one of the ways in which we do that is the photo ID law that we're establishing. We also have to look at people that try to cheat from a registration standpoint.
Right.
We also have to be checking the registration rolls to make sure that people are citizens, that they are residents, that they're not felons that have lost their right to vote. You have to have a comprehensive approach. It's just like Attorney General Sessions when he was talking about policing. You can't just say that the police officers are always right. The vast majority of the time they are, but you have to protect them, but you also have to go after the bad actors and protect everyone. It's a comprehensive approach.
I know that on the voter registration form, there's a box you have to check. It asks if you're a citizen or not. But once that gets turned in, you and I have had this conversation. It's not automatic that somebody's going and doing some sort of a background check to confirm that that's true. I would see that as a loophole that some people might take advantage of. Is it just cost prohibitive to fix that problem?
Well, I'm not sure that prior administrations have wanted to fix that problem.
Okay.
But the constitutional amendment that the people of the state voted overwhelmingly, 63% of them supported, not only allowed us to require individuals to show a government-issued photo ID, but we could use that photo ID to make them prove citizenship and residency besides their identity. And that's the direction we should go. We should be making sure that everyone knows that their vote is important, that we want them to be a part of the process. We just don't want them to vote 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, exactly. I had a conversation Saturday night as well with Rick Stream, who's now the Republican election judge here for St. Louis County. He said they changed their policies a little bit to sending out those voter cards.
Right.
To individuals instead of households, right? So if the individual doesn't live there anymore, it gets kicked back. Then they can take the next steps to determine if that person's still eligible to vote.
Yeah, that's part of the process. I think they're doing a great job. I was actually down at the St. Louis County Board of Elections right before I came here, between meeting with another meeting I had this morning, and it was great to work with them and to continue to work with them to see what we can do collaboratively to make sure that our elections are run smoothly and the will of the people is made known.
That's fantastic. What else are you doing right now? What other things are you working on in the Secretary of State's office?
We're obviously worried about the budget. The legislature's working on the budget, and it's a very tight budget year. So we're trying to make sure that we're doing everything we can with the least amount of funds. We're rolling out photo ID. We're looking forward later this year to set up some meetings with individuals on regulatory reform. We need to unleash the potential of the people of this state. This state is great because of its population, not because of its government. We want to get out of the way and let them do what they can to the best that they can.
So are there things within the Secretary of State's office, for example, regulations you think that hinder that?
Well, all your administrative rules come through the Secretary of State's office.
Yeah.
So we've talked with several legislators that have had some legislation they've been proposing. We want to get some large-scale meetings with multiple legislators this summer to have people from all different walks of life saying, how can we make it easier for people to do what they want to do as long as they're not hurting someone else? So I think we'll have a broader legislative package to try to make people be able to make their own decisions more often in the fall.
That's good. We chatted about this a minute ago. One of the things people call in here and send me messages about is this real ID issue that's being debated in Jeff City. And I know that it's probably not something that you necessarily take a stand on, but because we've talked about voter ID, this is going to affect driver's license in the state potentially and the collection of information, and that makes a lot of people nervous.
Yeah, it does. The bill passed out of the House by Representative Corlew. Senator Sylvie has a companion bill. It would allow the people of the state to decide if they wanted a real ID compliant license, which would require the state to collect and keep a lot of data on them for several years. There's a vigorous debate about that. Obviously, legislators want their constituents to be able to get onto planes or go onto military bases and federal buildings, but also there are times when you have to stand up and say, is this the role of the federal government? Should they be doing this? Sometimes you have to make a stand, and that discussion's ongoing in the legislature.
Yeah, it makes me wonder with the we've seen the Trump administration come in and start to roll back some of those things that had been put in place. I have heard no discussion on this, though, so I don't know if this is something they're considering or not. Have you?
You know, I believe the governor mentioned the other day that he had talked with President Trump and had asked him about the real ID. I don't want to speak for the governor. I don't want to speak for the president, but it's obviously an issue that is important to the governor. He's concerned about the welfare of the people of the state. There are individuals in the legislature that have reached out to the president, so I think there's hope that maybe there could be an agreement reached with the federal government, but time's running out with the legislature.
Right. So people who are listening, if you're not familiar with it, if this isn't repaired the way we hand out driver's license in, I believe, January of 2018, you won't be able to use your driver's license to get on an airplane or go in a federal building or go onto a military base because the Missouri law doesn't jibe with what the federal government is now requiring in terms of proof of who you are when you get that license. So that's what we're talking about here. One more thing. When we chatted the other night, and I think the tone of a lot of the speakers at the Republican dinner last Saturday night, which it was a great turnout, by the way, focused on the fact that we have done something that hasn't been done. And a year ago, there was one Republican statewide office holder, and now we've filled up Jeff City with them, right? And that's fantastic. But it also puts pressure on you guys to perform now that we've got that power.
It does, and I think that's wholly appropriate. Some people would say that Missouri turned red in November. I don't. I think that the people said that those that were elected weren't doing what they were supposed to do, and the people rightfully and appropriately told them to go back home. And I think that if we don't do what we said we would do, if we don't serve the will of the people, they'll do the same thing to us in 4 years. So it's good to hold our feet to a fire, hold us accountable, because transparent, accountable government is the best government for the people.
Well said. Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft, I appreciate your time. Let me remind people one more time, if you want more information on the voter ID issue, the website that's been set up by the Secretary of State is Show It To Vote, and that's the numeral 2, showit2vote.com.
Thank you very much. That's wonderful.
You bet. I appreciate that and appreciate you stopping by to see us today while you're in town. We'll get to a commercial break. We are going to talk more about this new ad that is now airing against Claire McCaskill, and I'm sure it's something that is making them a little nervous over there, given the fact that she's going to be in a pretty heated re-election campaign here very shortly. That and your phone calls, 314-969-9797. We'll be right back.